Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. It's the Ukraine War Frontline update for the 13th of May, June 2024. Get the right month, June. Thanks so much to JR who's done the mapping today. JR has been helping out for a year now. This is our year anniversary. He's let me know what a fabulous human being he is. Thank goodness for his existence. The cosmos has been kind. So big thanks to him, and please show your appreciation. He does an awful lot of other stuff as well, such as we're looking at doing a NAFO truck fundraiser, and he's put in a lot of effort into trying to sort out the initial organisation for that. More on that hopefully coming soon. So big thumbs up to JR, the Dutch legend. Right, if you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please check out the key on the screen at the moment. Pause the video. We'll go to the northern sectors, northeast of Kharkiv. Here we have the Lipsy sector that has seen no change, as according to the two mappers. If you remember, Surret Maps is not mapping at the moment. They will be back by all accounts, but they are taking a bit of time off with like work issues and whatnot. So we are without one of the mappers in our synthesis of the mappers here. Deep State Map in yellow and Andrew Perpetua in blue show some change to, well, not Andrew Perpetua actually, no change for him, but some change for Deep State Maps that I think is quite interesting. So in the middle of Vovchansk, we have a move back where the Russians have been pushed back, but there's been this little element of the Russians holding out here. I think rather than being a counterattack and taking this, I'd imagine this is them holding out. And it could explain why we saw some Russian POWs, some surrenders, 60 surrenders the other day. I don't know if it's something like that, having been surrounded there. Who knows? But yeah, that's certainly interesting. And then Deep State Map showing, well, it says the front line was clarified to the east of Vovchansk and the aggregate plant in the city. So some clarification there often means that actually it's not that there's been a counterattack or anything, but it's just that some changes to the mapping with new evidence coming to the fore. Now, the ISW Institute for the Study of War says Russian forces recently marginally advanced in Vovchansk amid continued offensive operations north and northeast of the city. Geolocated footage published on the 12th shows that a small Russian infantry group, supported by an armoured vehicle, marginally advanced south of Mikhailo Kotsiubinsky Street in northeastern Vovchansk. And here we have the 82nd Assault Brigade stopping a Russian assault at this location. We'll plug that in, see where it has the Russians. Okay, so that would suggest that they haven't advanced, as according to Deep State Maps, that's behind the Russian lines. As according to Andrew Perpetua, that being a grey zone, which would be an attack as opposed to an advance or an advance of the lines. It's fit, like I say often, it's a physical advance, like they are literally moving. That's an advance, if you want to define that as being an advance. But in terms of moving your front lines, I don't think it signifies that, but there is activity in that area where you would expect it, either in the grey zone or the Russians just operating behind their lines and the Ukrainians have hit them. Or Deep State Maps got the lines wrong there and the Russians are attacking into that area rather than controlling that area. So all of those options are available. It might well be that Deep State has just overstated things there and Andrew Perpetua has it right. Russian mill bloggers claim that Russian forces captured another building in northeastern Vovchansk in the aggregate plant area, advancing 200 meters deep within the city, and the Russian forces also advanced east of Vovchansk. Okay, so that could be this advance, that could be an advance, and it could be that they have advanced in the city and taken this aggregate plant, if that's where it is. I don't know that's that. Yeah, the aggregate plant. Yeah, so they could have advanced and taken that then, but it seems odd that it's cut off. So there's something funky going on there, that's for sure. A Mill blogger claimed that Russians lost several infantry fighting vehicles and an MTLB, an amphibious armoured fighting vehicle, while attempting to enter the aggregate plant ground. So they have lost some equipment in trying to take that locality. Here, yeah, we have images from different mappers showing that that's our map there, I think. But it's an odd little holdout for the Russians, and I assume the Ukrainians would be trying their damnedest to take that area out. And it could also be that they would throw in some aviation to drop some hammer bombs, the guided glide bombs or JDAMs, the French or American variants, to put pressure on the Russians who are there. Well, put more than pressure on them to do them over. So that's what's going on in the north. No change to the northeastern front line from Kupiansk to Svatovo to Crimea, which is good news for the Ukrainians there. And we have a little bit of an advance for the Russians towards Vyimka along this railway line that they have been inching forwards on over some time. As you can see, that's the distance they've gone since the 30th of May 2023. That white-grey line represents Deep State mapping for the Russian defensive line before the Ukrainian counterattacks. And so you can see it's a good marker to have there for really being just over a year. What have the Russians achieved in just over a year in this area? Not an awful lot. I mean, really, it's going to be somewhere around a couple of kilometers worth of gains just here. Otherwise, around this sector, it's fairly unchanged. A little change up in Bilharivka, and then obviously more significant changes down in Ivaniska. Although the counteroffensive, the Ukrainians took this land back and then they've kept it. The Russians, on the other hand, have taken land back towards Chasiv Yar. But we'll stay here around Vyimka. So if we go to the Institute for the Study of War, actually, they talk about it there. And that's going to be my map needing refreshing. So Ukrainian Kortitsia Group of Forces spokesperson noted on June the 12th that the incorporated settlement of Timkivka east of Kupiansk. Actually, sorry, this is not this is another thing totally. It's not on the map. There is no change to the mapping in that northeastern sector, as I've just mentioned, although the Russians have claimed to have taken a small settlement called Timkivka, which the Russian MOD claimed Russian forces captured on the 11th. Now, the settlement has not existed since Soviet times, and the Ukrainians emphasized that Ukrainian forces still control the area that used to be Timkivka. Voloshin, the spokesman, suggested that the Russian MOD claimed the Russian forces captured Timkivka for purely informational effect, because the Russian military command is counting on the fact that the average Russian does not know where Timkivka is on the map, much less that it does not exist as a populated area. So we've seen this a couple of times, different claims to do with certain villages. I remember sometime back, it's probably over a year ago, a similar scenario where this was a Soviet era place that actually only had like two houses. I don't know if that was a place up near north of Kupiansk. But anyway, so Timkivka, wherever that is, somewhere around here, the Russians have claimed it, put it on their daily report, and the Ukrainians said, hang on, it's not even a place. That's just for the Russian PR. So then when we go back to the ISW to come further down to the south, geolocated footage published yesterday indicates that Russian forces advanced recently southeast of Vyimka, which is where we are at. And positional combat operations in the area of Soledar, so that's where we're at. The Russian armed forces occupied a stronghold while advancing in the vicinity of Vyimka. The forward position of the Russian armed forces is under fire from drones from the Ukrainians. The advance of the Russian armed forces to Seversk is more than 1 kilometer, so it says there. And this position that the Russians hold is here. So that's at the very tip of the bridgehead that the Russians have there along that railway line, and they just have a position near a tree line there. That's why both mappers appear to be happy with changing the mapping in that area, making sense of that data point. So some advances there. Then we come down to Chasiv Yar. No change there. That's really significant. There's lots of fighting in the Canal micro district still. That's very heavy. The Institute for the Study of War said that the Ukrainians counterattacked, I think, in that area. Russians claimed it was unsuccessful. So we come on further to the south to Avdiivka, and you can see that certainly according to deep state maps, but both mappers seeing some changes, quite a number of changes to the Avdiivka area. Okay, we start with up here by Ocheratina, up towards this Nova Alexandriivka here. This features quite a bit in the ISW, but I'm not really going to go into too much detail. I am gonna pop into Novelska, but yeah, just some gains into Nova Alexandriivka, which is a bit of a shame because that is your next settlement on that the Russians are able to take really, or half take it so far. They'll move on, and that gets them ever so much closer to the road that connects Pokrovsk up to Konstantinivka up here, and that's really important. And so the Ukrainians will want to keep the Russians back here, but this is the one area that the Russians seem to be most consistently advancing in. Now we have a little bit of gain for the Russians around Novopokrovska, taking the whole of that small settlement. Deep State map previously had the Russians further back here, and it was Andrew Perpetua who'd had so that's the Ukrainian lines, of course. I'm getting confused because the red lines aren't on the map. So the line to the east here, that blue line, is Andrew Perpetua's Russian defensive line, and he's one that doesn't have Novopokrovska taken, but Deep State map does have the Russians getting control of that village. So that is a little bit of a concern there. And then some more gains for the Russians on the way past Netalove, north of this reservoir that is dammed at Karlivka there. That was a dam that was hit, that was bombed ages back. I presume it was fixed after that, but I think sort of a year ago plus the Russians had a pop at that. So yeah, the Russians coming around the north rather than trying to come around the south of that reservoir. I don't know what the benefit of that would be. There's a small area of land here that is between those two reservoirs, which could be a bit of a dangerous pinch point. I've talked before about how you've got the water features here that mean that this area is a bit of a funnel, and if the Russians were to try and take this area, they could be quite vulnerable from artillery, mortar, and all sorts of Ukrainian attention there. And lo and behold, that's actually the area where the Russians are furthest back. So that doesn't surprise me. And yet they're sort of inching along to the north of that. That does surprise me a little. I would have thought they would have gone to the south of there. Nonetheless, that is what they're doing. Now there's a where is Sokil? I need to find you. Give me 2 ticks. Yeah, that's where it is. It's further to the north now. There's quite a lot of activity around Sokil here, which is south of in between the two areas that the Russians have made gains. Apparently, the Russians are fighting both north and south of here. I think around this reservoir area, as well as around some heights there. If we look at the height gauge at the bottom right of my screen, you can see that 217 meters, so just about 220 there. It all seems to be there are some heights around here that the Russians are trying to take control of, but it all seems fairly flat at 220 meters. Goes downhill as you come into this kind of ravine, the start of that river. Nonetheless, the Russians are fighting over Sokil by all accounts. Now, I'm going to focus a little bit on Novelska. If you remember, if we zoom out a little bit, we had, when the Russians were back at this white line, the Avdiivka salient back last year in May, the Ukrainians were fighting around Pervomaisky to the south, and to stop the Russians from taking Pervomaisky, the Ukrainians held on to this very small agricultural village called Novelska, which is super well defended and fortified, and that stopped the Russians being able to flank Pervomaisky, which itself stopped the Russians being able to flank around here and come in behind the Ukrainians as they kept hold of Avdiivka. And then, of course, Avdiivka fell, and the Russians advanced, in all these directions. But Novelska has held out. Unfortunately, it looks like it's under quite a lot of pressure, and it could be falling there. So the Institute for the Study of War says geolocated footage published yesterday indicates that Russian forces recently advanced within Novelska, and we have some imagery here. Geolocations: 2 Ukrainian FPV drones fly at a Russian-controlled basement. So the Russians are in a basement, so they have taken some of the buildings in the settlement. Let's see where that basement is geolocated. Yeah, so that's pretty much why both mappers, I would assume, have changed their understanding of who controls what in that area. And that's a real shame, because it looks like Novelska has succumbed to the Russian pressure there. There are quite a number of fortifications all around here, and they were going back. If you look at these kind of areas, I think one of them was called the swimming pool or something. These are fortified areas that, and every single tree line as well, that have allowed the Ukrainians to hold on to this area really successfully. But they have eventually, so as I say, succumbed to the Russian pressure, which is a real shame. Oops, I don't know why my map's doing that. Let's get that back to going north-south. There we go. I don't know that there's any more detail about what's going on there, so we'll move further to the south to Krasnohorivka, where the Russians are expanding their control over the southern parts of the town, moving towards the west there. So yeah, that is a challenge for the Ukrainians there. And there seem to be these pulses, as I've said before, of Russians succeeding for a few days around, say, Krasnohorivka, then it peters out there, and then Novomykhailivka kicks back up again, and then that stops, then Marinka starts. It's not so often that everywhere on the front sees consistent gains on a daily basis. It's worth noting that I don't know if it says much in the Institute for the Study of War. No, it doesn't. We'll come to that. But there are these claims that I've seen. This is Andrew Perpetua adding this one. So this is from a Ukrainian source around Herorivka. So I'm just going to come out of the Krasnohorivka area, which has seen some fairly good gains for the Russians there, and down to Herorivka, or Herorivka with a G. I think it means Georgetown. This is an area to the west of Marinka, where the Russians moved through Marinka at snail's pace, destroyed the whole. This whole town was completely flattened, just rubbleized. And then they've been trying to move past there through to Herorivka. Now, Andrew Perpetua post this Ukrainian source saying, to the 17 units of the enemy's equipment that stormed Herorivka, 2 more were added, so 19. So the total number is 19, thanks for that maths, of which the boys successfully destroyed 14 units. Heavy fighting continues. So when you see these big numbers posted on a daily basis of infantry fighting vehicles, APCs and tanks getting lost, and you're thinking, where are they losing that number of vehicles? You think, we've got one attack here, one attack of 19 vehicles. So first thing to note is that that's the most vehicles we've seen used in an awful long time. We've been seeing 1s, 2s, 3s, 5s at the most. And I've commented that they just don't have enough kit. Well, here they've maybe stockpiled. They've really tried hard, evidently, to take Herorivka by committing 19 vehicles to that. But the more you commit, the more you can lose. And to lose 14 of 19 vehicles is absolutely devastating for the Russians. Special Herson Cat here says, heavy fighting and big Russian assault attempt reported on Marinka front right now. Quote, Russians attempted the assault in the Marinka direction. The enemy stormed with 17 units of AFVs, armoured fighting vehicles, so that kind of covers them all, in the direction of the village of Herorivka. The boys fought back about the results later. And then it talks about this, so that's exactly the quote that we just seen. So 19 units, 14 taken out. 14 destroyed vehicles, one would assume, destroyed, around this area just in one attack. It's absolutely incredible. So good news, it appears, for the Ukrainians there, and being able to repel the Russian attack and allow those those Russian defensive lines to stay where they are. No change to Vuhledar. A little bit of a change in the Staromyorsk area where the Russians have had a lot of success recently. They've taken Staromyorsk back, and it seems like they've just added a little bit into the north there. Ukrainians still trying to fight and keep hold of the outskirts, the northern outskirts of Staromyorsk there. Nothing else from any sources, I don't think, about Staromyorsk. There's only, Myrna, which is further to the west over here. I'm pretty sure this is Myrna. Yep, Myrna, there you go. I wish I knew my British geography as well as this. Right, okay, although I couldn't find Sockhill earlier. We have here a geolocation of a fire raid under the cover of an M113 armoured personnel carrier, possibly near the village of Myrna. So this is a bit unsure about the geolocation, this one. But the claim in the Institute for the Study of War says that on June the 11th, so 2 days ago, the Russian forces made a marginal gain in western Zaporizhia, but the Ukrainian forces regained some positions after conducting a counterattack. So it's not definite, but this is a potential geolocation for that counterattack. And we'll plug that one in, see where it gets us. Potential geolocation there. So that's in the grey zone. Could be that that's now under Ukrainian control. So the Ukrainian front line might want to move slightly further forward. So there is activity around the Myrna area, as we saw randomly, because it's not somewhere that had seen any particular activity for some time, for an awful long time, and then a couple of weeks ago suddenly it picked up randomly, and there was activity there, and then still ongoing to some degree. No change in Robotina, no change on the Dnipro River Delta. I don't know how much the Ukrainians are the other side of the river. None of the maps have changed this, but it does just indicate, remember, a grey zone as opposed to Ukrainian control. So the grey zone could just indicate that the Russians don't really go in there, they don't really control it because it's getting hammered by the drones, but it could be that there are no Ukrainian forces here. They've all pulled back across the river. I just don't know for sure. Anyway, there you go. That's the Frontline update for today, the 13th of June. Hopefully that was of use. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.